Hello there ladies and gentlemen, today I'm going to show you how you can make a dark theme for your website like this using just HTML, CSS and JavaScript. Now the cool thing about this project is that I have done all the calculations just using this variable over here. I have set the variable to be $scale and it equals to 100 pixels. Thus this entire project is highly scalable. To demonstrate, let's change the value to 400 pixels and see the difference. Over here, we can see that the button has scaled up in correct calculations. Let's check. It also works perfectly fine. If you're new to the channel, feel free to subscribe because I post videos like this based on practical web dev projects following the best practices of the industry so that you can level up. If that sounds interesting, then feel free to subscribe and join my gang. So without further ado, let's get started. Currently, I'm running this project on codepen.io. The link of this project will be given in the description down below. First things first, let's start with the HTML. Over here, we're going to create a div with the class name container. Next up, we're going to create 3 sibling divs with the class names of title, btn and content like this. On the content div, we're going to set some dummy text, lorem 40, then tab. Over here, we're going to write h1 tag, then write day/night, then write br tab, toggler, toggler, day or night toggler. So we're done with the HTML. Come over to the CSS and over here click this gear icon, then set the CSS preprocessor to be SCSS because Sass is much better than plain good old CSS. Come over to Google and write Google font Poppins. Next up, select this 300. Then click on import and copy the code over here. Come back to the CSS file and over here paste it like this. Let's change the default settings of our HTML file. Come over here and click the star button and curly braces. Set the default margin and padding to be 0 pixels. Set the box sizing to be border box. Then write body. Over here, set the font family to be Poppins. In our project, we have to repeat a lot of code. Instead of repeating the same code on multiple places, what we can do is we can create a little template. Before creating a template, I should demonstrate to you what happens when we create a template, when we use a template, and when we don't use a template. Now, we're going to place the entire thing on the center. In order to achieve this, come over here and write display flex. Flex direction, column, align items, center, justify content, center. You can see that it doesn't work. That's because we have to set the width and height property as well. So write width 100% and minimum height 100 VH. We are done. Instead of writing this code over here, what we can create is a Mixin, which works like a template. So come over here and write @mixin. We're gonna name our Mixin common. First bracket, curly braces. Over here write dflex tab, then flex direction. Set the value to be $a because we need to shift between the options of row and column. Next, justify content $p, align items $c, then set the width $d, height $e, and a background color of $f. Next up, come over to the argument section over here and write everything $a, b, c, d, e and f like this. We have successfully created a template for ourselves. Right now, instead of writing this whole thing, just come over here and write @include common. First bracket, then give semicolon over here, and over here write column, because the first argument is the flex direction. We have set it to column. Next up, we have to set the justify content and align items to be center. Then write center, CNTR, center. Next up, we have the width property, set it to 100%. Next up, we don't need the height because we have already set a minimum height of 100 VH, so it's gonna be no. We don't need the background color at the moment, we're gonna set it to null as well. Then remove this 1 2 3 4 5 lines of code. The results are same. The main difference is we have a much cleaner code. You can judge it for yourself. It looks much better than before. Next up, come over here and write dot container and set the width to be 80%. Then write dot title, set text align to be center. Then write dot content and set text align to be justify. We're done with our setup, ladies and gentlemen. Now come over to the HTML file over here, and inside the button we're gonna create an input type checkbox like this, and we're gonna set the name and ID to be check. Next up, we're gonna create a label for our checkbox and name it check. Inside the label, we're gonna create a div with a class name .box. Inside the box, we're gonna have a ball which will roll from the left to the right like this. Come over to the CSS, and at the bottom we have to remove this small box over here because we don't need this. So we're gonna write input third bracket type equal to checkbox curly braces d non tap. We are done. Next up, over here write .box, and inside over here we're gonna set the width and height. Instead of putting the value directly over here, we're gonna create a small variable over here. So come over here and write $scale and set it to 300 pixels. Originally it's gonna be 100 pixels, but I am enlarging it so that I can make you understand through this tutorial how things are working. So over the width and height, we're gonna set the scale. On the height property, we're gonna set $scale divide 2, which equals to 150 pixels like this. Next up, set the background color to be black, border radius, and set it to $scale divide 4, which equals to 75 pixels. Then set the cursor to be pointer. Next up, write .ball. Over here, we're gonna set the width to be $scale divide 2. We're gonna set the value of the width and the height to be equal to the height of the box, something like this. And then set the background color to be gray. Next up, we're gonna set the border radius 50%. Next, we're gonna set some border around our ball. Border 3 pixels, solid, black. You can change it however you want, but for this tutorial I'm setting to these properties. One thing to notice over here is this ball over here is centered at the top left corner of our box over here. In order to demonstrate this, let's set it to 4 from 2. We don't need this position over here. We need it to be positioned at the middle over here. In order to achieve this, come over here and write dflex. Next up, set the align items to be center. And voila, we have achieved our result. Over here we can implement a mixin. Let's do it. Over here we're gonna set first of all row, then The justify content will be null. Align items will be center. The width will be $scale. Height will be $scale divide 2 like this. And we want the background color to be black. Now we can remove all of this code over here. Our code looks much cleaner than before. We can apply the same thing over here. @include common, set the first 3 values to be null because we don't need the flexbox model over here. So null, 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 and set the width to be $scale divide 2, the original value, $scale, $scale divide 2, and then set the background color to be gray. And now we're going to remove these values from here. You can see that it works perfectly fine. One thing we should notice that this is an important point to discuss, ladies and gentlemen. We have to use 2 SVG, the moon and the sun. We're gonna set the sun over here and the moon over here. So when we are working with these two things, this ball over here will interrupt. In order to avoid this, what we can do is we can set the value over here to be position relative. But before doing that, we have to come over to the box and set the property position to be relative. And then over here we can set the property position to be absolute. Let's start writing the JavaScript. Let me pull the HTML over here so that you can see what I'm doing. Now we're going to target 3 objects, the check, the box, and the ball. In order to achieve this, we're going to write 3 lines of code. First of all, var check equal to document.querySelector, and then first bracket. Ladies and gentlemen, please don't make a mistake over here. When we are working with query selector, if we are targeting an ID, we have to write hash. But if we are working with the class, then we have to write a dot. The check over here is an ID, so we're gonna give hashtag CHECK. Then write var box. This is targeting the box. Document.querySelector. Then we're gonna set dot box because it's a class. Then var ball equal to document.querySelector, and then .ball. Now we're gonna add an event listener to this check over here. So come over here and write check dot add eventlistener. While adding the add event listener, make sure you have spelled it correctly. Next up, give first bracket and over here write change. Then add a function over here. Inside the function, we will create 2 if statements. Write another if statement. On the first if statement, write check dot CHECKED equal to true. Instead of writing check over here, you can also write this. This is referring to this check over here, which is the same thing as writing check.check. And over here, we're gonna write this dot checked equal to false. So what I'm trying to achieve over here is I'm telling my code that when this little box is checked, it's gonna move to the right. But if it's not checked, if it's unchecked, then move the ball to the left. So come over here and target the ball. Ball dot set attribute, then write style. Over here write transform, then colon translate x, and set the value to be 100%. Putting a semicolon over here is optional, but if you want to set 2 properties or more than 1 property at the same time, then you have to put this semicolon. It's mandatory. Let's go and check the result. So when I click over here, it moves to the right, but it doesn't come back. In order to achieve this, copy this line of code and paste it over here like this and set this value to be 0%. And we are successful. Let's check it out. It works fine, but it moves really fast. In order to slow down the speed, we have to write a single property. But the problem is we have to write it on multiple places. In order to avoid this, come to the Mixin we have created a long time ago. Over here, write transition all 1s is. So by writing the transition all 1s is inside the Mixin, what happens is that whenever we use Mixin anywhere, it's gonna automatically push the code inside that block of code. So let's check it out. It works perfectly fine. So far so good. Now we're gonna set the SVG inside our box. Come over to flaticons.com and write sun. You can choose any image you want, but for this tutorial I'm selecting this. Then click the SVG option over here. Then free download. Next up, over here write moon. Then I'm gonna select this one over here. Then SVG and then click the free download option. Come back to our HTML and below the div with the class name ball, we're gonna create another div with the class name scenery. Inside the scenery, we're gonna create two divs with the class name. First of all, the moon and then the sun, like this. .moon tab and then .sun, like this. And then we're gonna select the files that we have downloaded earlier and then include it inside over here. Let me show you. So here are the files that I have downloaded earlier. First of all, I'm gonna include the moon. So drag it and then drop inside the div with the class name moon, like this. And then minimize the block of code by pressing this small icon over here, like this. Same thing applies for the sun. Then drag and drop over here and then close the entire div, like this. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we can see that nothing is showing up. That's because these SVG files don't have the width and height property inside the SVG tag. That's why we have to physically set the values inside the CSS. Back to our CSS, come at the very bottom and over here we're gonna create a new block of code, .scenery. Next up, write SVG and set the width to be 100 pixels. We can already see the SVG files behind the ball. Instead of giving the value directly over here, write $scale divide 3, which also equals to 100 pixels. We can see that the SVG behaves in a column fashion, but we want it to behave like a row. In order to achieve this, come over to the scenery block of code and write dflex and then flex direction to be row. Let's check the results. It works good, but we need these two SVGs to be separated at the very left and at the very right. In order to achieve this, come over here and write justify content space between. After setting the justify content to be space between, you can notice that it's not working as expected. We were to set the SVGs on the very left and the very right. That's because of this line over here. In order to fix this, change it from row to column. And then over here set it to center. And over here write null. Now it's working perfectly fine. You can see that it's at the very right, which doesn't look good. In order to fix this problem, come over to this block of code and write padding Top and bottom set it to 0 pixels and left and right 10 pixels. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, it looks good. At any point, if you think that the space over here and the space over here doesn't match up, then what you can do is you can set a padding of 5 pixels, or you can set any value you want. So come over here, the top will be 5 pixels. So 5, and the right hand side will be 10 pixels. We're gonna set bottom 0 pixels and the left will be 10 pixels. We are done. Alright then, ladies and gentlemen, so let's include the Mixin over here. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we are 90% done. The next thing we will do is change the font color from black to white. When we toggle this, at the same time we will change the body color from white to black when we toggle over here. In order to achieve these results, come over to the JavaScript and we're gonna set the values over here. So first things first, if the checkbox is checked, we want the box to turn white like this. Write box.set attribute. Inside here write style, then over here write background color and set it to white like this. Let's check the results. Alright, let's revert it back. Copy the whole code and paste it over here, and over here write black. Let's check the results. Alright, it looks good. Next up, we're gonna target the body. In order to target the body, you're gonna write document.body.set attribute. Over here write style, and we're gonna set the background color black. Copy the whole thing, paste it over here and change the value to white. Let's check the results. Alright, it looks good. Now we need to change the color of the font. In order to do this, come to this line and we have included a semicolon. Now time to include another property. Write color, we're gonna set it to white. Same thing applies here. Write color black. Let's check the results. And voila, we're 95% done, ladies and gentlemen. Come back to the CSS and cut this line and paste it at the very top like this. And instead of writing the value over here directly, set a variable $time. Create a variable over here, time, and just set 1s. You can change the time anyhow you like, but for this tutorial I have set it to 1 second, and instead of giving it a 300 pixels, we're gonna set it to 100 pixels. Next up, we're gonna position this button on the right. In order to achieve this result, come over to the container and over here write dflex, then flex direction column. Next up, target the .btn class like this, .btn, and inside here write align self and set the value to be flex end. Next up, set some margin on the top and bottom of 10 pixels. Left and right value will be 0. There we go, ladies and gentlemen. We're 99% done. So which one is the remaining 1%? We need to use a small media query. That's because when we increase the size, then it looks ugly. In order to avoid this, come over to the container class over here and write @media min width. Set it to 500 pixels. Then curly braces. Then set the width to be 50% like this. Let's check the results. So I'm telling my code to adjust the container class to be 50% when the width of the screen is minimum 500 pixels. So let's check. So this is less than 500 pixels. This is more than 500 pixels. So ladies and gentlemen, we're done with our project. If you like the video, give a like and subscribe today in order to get more video tutorials like this. Till then, take care and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.